All right, so picking up from where we were Sunday morning, we're looking at Matthew chapter 15, verses 29 through 31. Jesus departed from there, and let's see, he was, if you remember, let's go back up to where he was. He was up around Tyre and Sidon, and he was coming down. Departed from there, skirted the Sea of Galilee, and went up on the mountain and sat down there. He came through Decapolis, if you remember, and came to the Sea of Galilee, and there's a mountain there on the seaside there. Then great multitudes came to him, having with them the lame, blind, mute, maimed, and many others, and they laid them down at Jesus' feet, and he healed them. So the multitude marveled when they saw the mute speaking, the maimed made whole, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they glorified the God of Israel. So how many people came out in verse 30? Just multitudes, right? Great multitudes is what we're told here. The two Greek words for great and multitudes are trying to convey the idea of a huge gathering, an extreme large amount of people. The Greek word for multitudes means a large group of common people, like you might see a big crowd at a festival or something like that, some other big gathering. And then the word of great for great is supposed to be multiplying or magnifying that idea. So it's great. It's a bunch, just magnifying how large that group is. So trying to make us understand that it's a lot of people. So we'll see how many in general when we move to the next verses. But remember, this crowd would have been mainly a Gentile crowd. Does anybody have anything else on these verses? I know we were just here at the end of this. Yes, Pat?
We talked about all the miracles he did with these people, but I just realized it said in verse 31, the maimed were made whole. So if somebody had an arm cut off, that arm came back.
That's right. And we've seen other miracles like that where he restored somebody, something complete. Now maybe this kind of creative power is more than some of the other things we've seen, but yeah, he would have restored, like you said, if they were missing something, that he would have drawn that back. Yes.
There was a debate in Akron years ago, Larry and I got to go to, and the one guy was a denominational preacher saying that he could heal people, and so there was a man in the community that lived in Smithville. He used to be a member of the church named Dave Keeper, and he had lost a leg. He sat in the front pew, and he dared the guy to put his leg back on.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I see what you mean now. Yeah. We have a lot of charlatans, unfortunately, that claim such powers, right? So, yeah, but we know that's not. God can still heal. Don't get me wrong. God can heal always, but we don't see people running around with that kind of power where they can heal on demand. And you'll notice Jesus was very careful about how he did things. He never did anything for a show. He never did it like the Pharisees would demand or ask for a sign, and he didn't do those things for them. And, well, as a matter of fact, we're going to get to that, and he's just going to tell them, no, you're not going to get that. So, is there anything else? Okay. All right, so our next verses 32 through 39. Now Jesus called his disciples to himself and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I do not want to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way. Then his disciples said to him, Where could we get enough bread in the wilderness to fill such a great multitude? Jesus said to them, How many loaves do you have? And they said, 7, and a few little fish. So he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves and the fish and gave thanks, broke them and gave them to his disciples, and the disciples gave to the multitude. So they all ate and were filled, and they took up 7 large baskets full of the fragments that were left. Now those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And he sent away the multitude, got into the boat, and came to the region of Magdala. And I think some translations will say like Magadan. It's a slightly different name, but I mean, it's the same idea. So let's look at Mark's account real fast. And this is Mark chapter 8, verses 1 through 10. In those days, the multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion on the multitude because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their own houses, they will faint on the way, for some of them have come from afar. Then his disciples answered him, How can one satisfy these people with bread here in the wilderness? He asked them, How many loaves do you have? And they said, 7. So he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves and gave thanks and broke them and gave them to his disciples to set before them, and they set them before the multitude. They also had a few small fish, and having blessed them, he said to set them also before them. So they ate and were filled, and they took up 7 large baskets of leftover fragments. Now those who had eaten were about 4,000, and he sent them away, immediately got into the boat with his disciples, and came to the region of Dalmanutha. And that's the best pronunciation I'm going to do. So, something like that. But pretty much the same account. So, I wanted to just point out where Jesus is. He's, here, let me do it this way. There's a mountain right there somewhere. That's basically where he's supposed to be, by the Sea of Galilee, in a mountain there. And this was this track that I was looking for earlier, where he traveled down from the Tyre and Sidon area down here. And so that's where Jesus is at the moment, at that mountain by the Sea of Galilee. Now, if we look at question 9 in the workbook, with what did Jesus feed more than 4,000 people? Just some bread and fish, right? 7 loaves and a few little fish, right? Now, I apologize. This picture is not accurate at all. There's not 7 loaves. The 2 fish are probably too big, and they're not even ready to eat or anything. They would have had pickled or dried fish. But this is just for the idea again. So it's similar to like the 5,000, because it was I think I even used this same picture for that. But Jesus is making it very obvious that this is a miracle. He's going to provide food for these people. You know, God can always use whatever we have, even if we think it's too little or not enough. Yeah, Pat.
Earlier in the 14th chapter of Matthew and then in Mark, chapter 6, I think it is, there is 5 loaves and 2 fish where it says the multitude.
Well, that's the other multitude, right? Yes. I was saying for this, this is inaccurate because it was 7 loaves and a few little fish. And here you can count 5 and 2. But yeah, so this picture, when I used it for the other one, it was more accurate, right? But yeah, but for this event, it's a little inaccurate. So, but I couldn't find a better picture, so I think I just reused it if I remember right. So let's see. So this is similar, again, like we're talking about, to the 5,000 when he fed them. Now, why is Jesus concerned for the multitude, for the people? Yes, Gary.
He said a lot of them had come from a long way off, and they didn't have food, and they were very hungry and afraid they, might faint, and hurt, whatever.
They come from a long ways off. They've been with him 3 days, right? Now, back then in those days, if you brought a little food with you, fine, but 3 days, I don't know about 3 days. That's a lot to have to try to think you're going to carry with you. So they were probably out of food. And he didn't want them to faint on the way. Like you're saying, he didn't want them to, perish on the way. So Jesus has compassion, he cares. So now, how did the disciples respond? I thought this was kind of, yes, Matt.
Kind of like questioning, well, what are we supposed to do? Where are we going to find food for all these people?
Right. Where are we going to get enough bread for these people? And it kind of makes you wonder, aren't these the same guys that were here last time for the 5,000? But, it seems kind of odd to me. That's all. But when I think about it, it could have been as simple as some kind of unbelief again, some kind of doubt. Maybe we would have the same problem. I always try to look at all these people and I think, well, I know better than them. Would I have the same issue or problem? Yes, Matt. And then Pat.
Of course, yes, they saw that happen before and they should have known Jesus could do it. But probably in the interim, they were living life, eating food the normal way.
Yep.
And thinking back, well, that was some special thing. And then here we are in this new situation. Well, it was just normal times. Just kind of get back in normal mode.
That's true. Maybe in our mind we would think, well, that was a special event and this is not.
Like all the stuff in the Bible, we believe these things happen, but we're here living our normal lives without miracles, and we kind of forget that God really can do all this stuff.
Yeah. Pat?
He took the opportunity to do another miracle to make believers.
Well, yeah, I mean, this really would make believers, right? So Jesus is showing them that he can do this again, and he's going to do that again. And, maybe there's some other reasons. I mean, it could be that, the 5,000 were mainly Jewish. This is mainly Gentiles. There may have been some thought there that for some reason that wouldn't happen, or he wouldn't do that, or I don't know. There's just a number of different reasons why. And, I don't like to give them too hard a time because I figure they're the ones that really started this whole church, Jesus and them, so the whole body of Christ. So, but anyway, so what does Jesus ask in verse 34? Yes. What you got? How many loaves? How much food you got? What have you got? I'll work with it, right? So that's Jesus. I mean, that's just the way he is. And he gets the crowd to sit down. He gives thanks or blesses the food and then passes it to his disciples, and they give it to the people. And again, they all ate till they were filled. Nobody went hungry, nothing like that. And how many baskets did they take up afterwards? 7 large ones. Now, when Jesus fed the 5,000, how many did they take up? 12, right? Right. So, okay, this is just an open question because I have an idea, but it's just my idea. So, why would these be different, you think? Yes, Matt?
I mean, there's 7 loaves here, so
that corresponds. That's an idea.
Well, 7 and 12 are important numbers, but 7 loaves.
Yeah, but that's true. There were 7 loaves too. Okay, here's my idea. It's like I said. So 5,000, they were mainly Jews, 12 baskets representing like the 12 tribes. 4,000, mainly Gentiles, 7 baskets, a perfect or complete number. In both cases, it's okay if you don't agree with my idea, but in both cases, regardless of that, Jesus is showing that he's providing for everyone, Jew and Gentile, regardless of my idea. He's still showing that he's doing that. So true for both cases. Now, and there is one other thing. The baskets at the 5,000, the word for baskets there is a different word than the word here for the 4,000. It was a basket that was considered sort of that the Jews would use to carry food in. So it'd be more of what we would think of as kosher. It would be okay. These are just large general purpose baskets. These are not special. So just to mention, it was just an interesting thing that I read about. So it was, okay. So in verse 38, when we come down to it, how many people were fed, really?
There was a lot more than 4,000.
More than 4,000? We don't know exactly, right? More than 4,000. I know I've been saying like 4,000, but that's 4,000 men. It says plainly that they did not count the women and children, so we really don't know. Plenty more than 4,000 now. And the same was true of the 5,000. We don't know how many men, women, and children were there. So, all right. And really, there probably wouldn't have been, I guess, a ton of women and children, because you wouldn't bring your family out in the wilderness unless you thought it was really safe or something. So I don't know how many there would actually be. Just a thought. So now that the people are fed, in verse 39, what does Jesus do? Oh, yes, well, that's true. He sent the multitude away, and he got into a boat and left, right? So, but Jesus always gives us what we need before he sends us off or sends us out, right? He's taking care of us. But then, like you say, they got in a boat, they crossed the sea. Now, I have on a map here, so they're over here, this area, and they're heading up here in this general area, this Magdala, which is on, that's how it's named on my map. Again, it may say Magadan or something like that. Let's see. Yeah, Magadan, that's a note I made here. Now, Mark says they came to the region or the area or district of Dalmanutha. Now, so obviously these two places are closely associated, or they're in the same general area. And the idea is they're just saying they're traveling to this general area. They didn't necessarily say they're going to that town or anything. One thing to note about Dalmanutha, and I'm still just saying that the way it looks to me, there was a battle that occurred there during the first Jewish rebellion against the Romans. And so that might have been something that Mark was thinking of, was in that area when they were heading over there, that battlefield, Dalmanutha. Yes?
I have a question about the woman in the Bible called Mary Magdalene. Does that mean that her name Mary Magdalene, that she's from Magdalene?
There was a note that she's probably from there. I did see that. That's probably where she's from. But now, I guess the Bible doesn't strictly say that, right? So, unless we see it somewhere else. I don't remember that right now. But one of the notes I read did say that was where she's supposed to be from. Let's see. So, yeah, so Mark was probably thinking of that battleground, and that would have been something when he wrote his account, a lot of people would have known about, and they would have easily remembered the area that was in. So, all right. So, let's see. And there's one thing I want to mention before we move on that I read about. There's a thought that the feeding of the 5,000 signaled the end of Jesus' Galilean ministry with the Jews. And then here, the feeding of the 4,000, the end of his Gentile ministry. You know, he's been going through the Gentile areas, and we don't really know how long he was there. But that's the idea that some had put forth. So I just wanted to mention it. It was an interesting idea because we're going to see in the next chapters he is going to be heading south to Jerusalem and to the cross. So.
Well, you know, when the woman wanted to go on Broyhill, he said that he could, that he didn't go to the Gentile.
Yeah, he said, it's kind of funny. He's purposely in Gentile area, but he's telling her that he has come just for the Jews and not for the Gentiles. Yeah. But at the same time, he does turn around and help her.
And then he goes to the Gentiles.
Yeah, and then he continues, going through some of the Gentile areas. Right. So he does have a little ministry here that we see. We may not know all the details of it, but so it's just anything else though on these verses or this chapter? All right. Let's see. I have chapter 16 here somewhere. It's just a matter of finding it. Because I like to open everything up all at once, and then I just kind of tab around. So, Matthew chapter 16. Let me get this here. And I am kind of I put that one quote there, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God," because it's a very important thing we see in this chapter. So we'll see Jesus have a little conflict with the Pharisees and the Sadducees in this chapter. And then in Caesarea Philippi, Peter's going to make that confession. And Jesus tells the disciples that they are heading to Jerusalem and he will suffer and die and rise again. So he's preparing them for what's to come. And then Jesus also in this chapter is going to remind us of the cost of discipleship. So the workbook authors points to ponder the confession of Peter and Jesus' response to him and the cost of discipleship. Those were the two things that he was thinking of. And then if we look at question number 1 from the workbook, the main points, the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Peter confesses Jesus as the Christ. Jesus predicts his death and resurrection. And then again, the cost of discipleship. We'll look at each one of those. Again, just pointing out, I never know when we're going to break and when we're going to come back. So this was just to remind us of where Jesus is right now. So that's where he is at the end of chapter 15. Let's see. Oh, yeah. And of course, now the Lord is back in Galilee. So who shows up?
That's Sadducees and
The Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? They got to show up. That's okay. You had the right idea, though. I know. So we'll start here with these first 4 verses in Matthew chapter 16. Then the Pharisees and Sadducees came and testing him asked that he would show them a sign from heaven. He answered and said to them, "When it is evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and threatening. Hypocrites, you know how to discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah." And he left them and departed. So what's the relationship between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, if you had to talk about them?
One believes in the resurrection, and the other believes there is no resurrection. It's one of the main things that they have.
That's one of the main things they kind of conflict on, right? Do you have something, Matt?
I think the Pharisees are looked at as conservative teachers sort of among the people, and the Sadducees were more like in Jerusalem. I know this isn't necessarily Jerusalem, but
right?
Like the high
but that's true.
People and all those people that were appointed there.
Yeah, so the Pharisees are looked upon by the people, and they're associated. They're out in the different places and locations. The Sadducees are largely in Jerusalem. That's true, and they tend to be a little more political and kind of what's the word? They're helping Rome, or they're kind of collaborators. Thank you. So they're not really, some of the people don't like them very much. So, but usually they were opponents in certain beliefs. Things like such as the written and the spoken law. Yes, Pat?
They both like to stress the traditions, and there was one more than the other.
Well, I think they both liked the traditions, because like the Pharisees did and the Sadducees, who were still mainly the priests at the temple, and they were in charge of the rituals and the sacrifices and all of that. So I think both were really still into some of that as far as the rituals and those things, just following the letter of the law without really following the heart of the law. So what brings them together here? Jesus, right? Right. They want to test Jesus, so that brings them together. A common, in their minds, I'm speaking in their minds, a common enemy brings them together, or a common testing, you may say, but opposition to Jesus, basically. For some of them, he's a threat to them and their positions of power and importance. And it's likely these are men from the Sanhedrin, the council, which had both Pharisees and Sadducees, because, as Matt said, the Sadducees really were more down in Jerusalem than now we're up in Galilee. So most likely these people are from the council, but that's just a most likely. Now, some of the testing could be a genuine desire to see if Jesus is the Messiah, because I'm assuming, again, that they've traveled from Jerusalem. They're from the council. There may be some genuine desire to see that. But many Pharisees and scribes and people have witnessed Jesus' miracles by now. So the indication from these verses and what we'll read in Mark is that they simply don't want to believe. They want to maintain their own doctrine. And it's kind of like what we see with people today with atheists and others. They want to maintain whatever their belief is, and they don't want to change, and they don't want to believe anything else. So let's look at Mark's account. Mark chapter 8, verses 11 and 12. Then the Pharisees came out and began to dispute with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven, testing him. But he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, "Why does this generation seek a sign? Assuredly, I say to you, no sign shall be given to this generation." Now, who's missing from Mark's account, if you notice there in verse 11? Sadducees. He didn't mention them. I don't know if it's really that important, but just something to notice. Matthew does give us a little more detail anyway. So Mark's account is shorter. In verse 11, how are the Pharisees interacting with Jesus?
They're arguing with him.
Right. They're disputing, they're arguing, and they're seeking a sign and testing. But the disputing, I just wanted us to see that. There's a dispute. There's some arguing going on here. So disputing, debating, disagreeing, they're seeking a sign, desiring and demanding a sign. Otherwise, he's not the Messiah if he doesn't give them the sign they're looking for. Testing and trying to see if he meets their requirement for the Messiah. So how does Jesus react spiritually? He sighed deeply, right? He sighed deeply in his spirit. So the Greek word means to groan or sigh deeply. So it's like really, it conveys, so I took this from Bible Hub because I thought they explained it better. It conveys a deep, audible expression of distress or longing. It is often used to describe a profound emotional response such as grief, frustration, which I could see why he would be frustrated, or yearning. It reflects a sense of burden or a deep-seated emotional reaction to circumstances. In this case, these guys they're just not getting it, and I could see if Jesus was any number of these things, frustrated or, grieved by the fact that they don't see and they don't understand. I could understand all of that. So he's kind of saddened and frustrated by their unbelief, their lack of understanding. So how does Jesus verbally respond to them? Oh, I'm sorry, Pat. What'd you
I
add?
was just going to say, we have a saying today. He said, "Red in the evening, sailors take."
Oh, yeah, I was going to get to that, but yes, we do. He's kind of
Sailors delight.
right. He's doing a different version of that. Of course, probably his is more close to the original than ours. But yeah, mine is like let's see if I can remember it right. Let's see. Red sky in the morning, sailor take warning. Red sky in the evening, eve, sailor take leave. That's the one I heard most. But there's probably other variations. Yes.
It's got night, sailor's delight.
Yeah, see.
It's got to rhyme, right?
Yeah, you have to make it rhyme, and it depends on what you've heard. It's fine. Sailor take leave, I think, stuck with me because that meant, he could just go take it easy. So, but sailor's delight is good too. So anyway, so Jesus, he responded to them, "Why do you seek a sign?" And he says, "No sign will be given." So, actually, we're kind of out of time for this evening. Yes.
I was just going to say, he didn't linger, so he says, "Take it or leave it." He just walked away.
Right. He did not linger. He left them and departed. And I was actually, we'll talk about that a little bit too, because you notice it says he left them and departed. That's kind of saying the same thing twice the way we read it, but it's actually not, because if you look at the Greek, there's two different meanings really being expressed there. But that, like I said, that's all the time we have for this evening. So is there anything before we end the class? Okay. All right. So we'll pick up from here Sunday morning then. Sunday morning. Thank you for your time and your attention